TVOD, 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 TVOD. Warm, leatherette. Warm, leatherette. Warm, leatherette. Warm, leatherette. See the breaking glass in the underpass. See the breaking.
Welcome to the Leading Groove. I'm your host, Brian Jacobs. Every week I'll be talking to you about various artists, albums, record labels, and even genres. Where did they come from? How did they get here? What was their importance? We recorded live every Wednesday night from one of the oldest alternative music venues in the country, the legendary Respectable Street here in West Palm Beach. The Leading Groove is the blank space before the music starts on the record, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about everything before the music starts. And today, I'm excited to be talking about Mute Records, how Mute Records got their start, their weird beginnings, and their chance encounter that would launch them into global recognition. Daniel Miller, the founder of Mute Records, was born in London in 1951. His father was a popular actor as early as the 1920s in Vienna, Austria. His father, a Jew, fled to London in 1939 to escape the Nazis at the start of the Second World War. After moving to London, his dad had a successful TV and film career in the UK. Following in his father's footsteps, Daniel went to art school to study TV and film from 1969 to 1972, where he began to get into the krautrock scene and early electronic music, from bands like Kahn, Faust, Neu, and of course, Kraftwerk. Kahn has been noted as an influence to everyone from the Jesus and Mary Chain to Brian Eno, and was even sampled by Kanye West. Now, if you notice, driving minimalist and repetitive rhythms, that will come up again from band to band to band. Faust is another band that was early in the krautrock scene in Germany, but a bit more experimental. This is Ricochets by Faust. Yet another band that was popular in the time for Daniel Miller would have been Neu. I think they would have had great influence on him just from an art perspective. This is the song Super by Neu.
Neu. Neu. Neu.
That was Super by Neu. Now, they also did Super 16 and Super 78. And you can go ahead and guess Super 16 is the song Super, slowed down by 16. Now this is Super 78, same song, sped up to 78. Now, for Noy, this is obviously an art piece, and I think Miller may have had some inspiration by this. I'll tell you more about that later. Another big influence on Miller would have been the same band that was hugely influential to anybody with a synthesizer and a drum machine. Kraftwerk. Here's Autobahn. After listening to all four of these bands, they all have two things in common. They're all a simple, constant driving rhythm. No chord changes, just a simple driving rhythm. And they're all experimental in nature. After college, Miller went on to DJ in Switzerland and then on to do work editing movies. Fast forward to 1977, he'd saved up enough money to buy a used Mini Korg 700S and a reel-to-reel and start experimenting with electronic music at home. A year later, the results would become a cult classic and an underground hit. Under the name The Normal, Miller releases a 3-song single consisting of Warm Leatherette,
Warm Leatherette. Warm Leatherette. Warm Leatherette. Warm Leatherette. See the breaking glass in the under.
The flip side of this single is TVOD.
TVOD. TVOD. TVOD.
Miller said he wanted the sound of the recordings to be visual, like driving along a highway between large buildings, then going through a tunnel. And TVOD does exactly that.
TVOD. TVOD. TVOD.
I mean, if any song can give you the visual of driving along a highway between large buildings and going through a tunnel, I think TVOD is it. Warm Leatherette, on the other hand, Warm Leatherette really got all the love as a club hit. I mean, it's fun, it really is, and it deserves all the glory it got. But to me, TVOD is the hero of the two songs. It took me 20, 30 years to catch up, but I really love this silly song. Lastly, on this release is a cover of John Cage's 433, which is literally 4.5 minutes of a mic outdoors recording the environment. If you're not familiar with the history of 433, I encourage you to Google it or YouTube the performance piece live. It's a great social experiment. 433 again, it's literally just 4 minutes of noise. Not too dissimilar to Super 16 and Super 78 by Noy. I think the fact that Miller included 433 speaks to who he is as a character and a person. I mean, this guy's either completely out of ideas or deep down this man's an artist. And I think looking back at Noy, including Super 16 and Super 78, that had to be influential as an artist to say, this is more than music, this is art. And after all, that's the entire point of 433. Well, Miller originally recorded the single in his London flat. But he created Mute Records out of his flat for the sole purpose of releasing this album. He had the albums printed and distributed them himself to stores. Not sure if he would sell any, he printed the bare minimum of 500. Went to Small Wonder Records and sold them 10. And then went to Rough Trade, who played the record in the store and then asked him how many he had. After telling them 500, they said no. You need at least 2,000, and they lent him the money to press the rest. And after the Sounds magazine reviewed it and called it the single of the century, well, it sold out pretty quick. At this point, he was working at Rough Trade, but in 1979, he became a legitimate record label by releasing singles by DAF and Fad Gadget after they sent demos to Rough Trade. Here's Fad Gadget, Back to Nature. In 1979, Miller's thirst to create music is not quenched. He recorded a cover of Chuck Berry's Memphis, Tennessee.
Long distance information, give me Memphis, Tennessee. Help me find the party, tried to get in touch with me. She could not leave her number, but I know who placed the call. 'Cause my
Under the band name Silicone Teens, Miller again releases Memphis, Tennessee, the cover of Chuck Berry's.
Long distance information, give me Memphis, Tennessee. Help me find the party, trying to get in touch with me. She could not leave her number, but I know who placed the call. 'Cause my uncle took the message and he wrote it on the wall.
Silicone Teens was actually a fictional band consisting of Daryl, Jackie, Paul, and Diane, but it was really just Miller by himself. The following year, he released an entire album of covers of rock standards from the 50s and 60s in the same synth-pop fashion. Two of the songs charted in the top 10, Judy in Disguise
Judy in disguise, that's what you are.
and the other song to hit the charts was Just Like Eddie, which is another cover song about Eddie Cochran. If you don't remember the name Eddie Cochran, I'm sure you remember the song Summertime Blues.
Whenever I'm sad, whenever I'm blue, whenever my troubles are heavy, beneath the stars I play.
From here, Miller would go on to release several more singles by Fad Gadget, DAF, Non, but his 10th release was in 1980, Robert Reynolds' Double Heart on Location. Now, Robert Reynolds was not only prolific in the post-punk era, but was Daniel Miller's live partner when touring as The Normal. So they go back. Here's On Location by Robert Reynolds. To me, On Location has a bit of a Joy Division feel to it, and Joy Division would have been touring and popular in the scene at this time. His other songs, not so much, but this is Joy Division to me all day. One day in 1979, at a Fad Gadget show in London at the Bridge House in Canning Town, there was an opening band from Essex. Daniel Miller saw this band during sound check. Legend has it they had 3 little synths on beer crates, and the lead singer had a light on the floor shining upward to give himself a more gothic presence. From song 1 during sound check, Daniel said, "What is this? It's incredible." Thinking for sure it would go downhill from here, but it didn't. It just got better and better. After the show, Miller went backstage and introduced himself and asked if they wanted to do a single. There's a bit more to the story, but this is the end result. Depeche freaking Mode not only signs with Mute, but when approached by the big record labels before their first singles released in February of '81, they show loyalty to Daniel Miller. I'm sure much of that is exactly because he's Daniel Miller. He's not a corporate stooge, he's part of the scene, he's already had several songs that charted, and he's a bit of a hero within the scene for doing so. Their next single will be New Life. And shortly thereafter, the monster hit, Just Can't Get Enough, is released. Now, Depeche Mode goes on to release hit after hit. Miller states pretty much their entire set list from that opening night became their first singles and their first album. Not long after, Vince Clarke leaves Depeche Mode and forms Yazoo. But he stays with Mute Records. This gives us Don't Go. Don't Go, in my opinion, is an absolute masterpiece. In 1983, Miller goes on to sign Nick Cave's band, The Birthday Party, which also gives him Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds in 1984. 1985 brings on I Start Counting, and Erasure, another project of Vince Clarke.
Someone at the door, I hear voices in my head.
1986 brings another Depeche Mode side project from Andy Wilder this time, Recoil and Faith Healer. 1986, EDM royalty joined Mute Records. Nitzareb released Let Your Body Learn in 1987.
Fast beat the feet. Fast for the hands. Fast beat the feet. Fast for the hands. Melt in the music got drums. Melt in the music got drums. Choose a fast beat, choose a hard line, choose a fast beat.
Oh, following year, 1987, Miller steals legendary Wire over to Mute Records and released The Ideal Copy, which has my favorite Wire song, Ahead. 1987 brings further releases from bands like Laibach and These Immortal Souls, but another band sign that obviously would have been influenced by Miller's release as The Normal and Silicone Teens. This release on Mute Records in 1988, concreting yet another underground anthem. Biting My Nails by Renegade Soundwave.
She came up to me and she said, catch you later, baby, I've got a split. I've got a habit, I just can't quit. Catch you later, baby, I got a split. I've got a habit, I just can't quit.
Now, the following year, 1989, Die Krupps released Machineries of Joy. I remember bringing this 12-inch of the song Too Respectable Street 1989 for the DJ to play, and I still have it.
Work, true work, pay, sweet pay.
Now, 1991 brings us techno greats Fortran 5, made up of members from I Start Counting that were signed a few years earlier onto Mute. Throughout the next several years, he brought on many established artists not happy with their current record deals. However, the record industry is changing at this point, profits are down, and Miller thin on money and being offered table scraps for the company. But that's about to change. One artist that likely saved Mute Records would be Moby with the release of Play and the huge commercial success that it was.
Love got the mighty, let me tell the news. My head got wet in midnight dew. Red God, I've been down on my bending knees, talking to a man from Galilee. My God spoke and he...
Moby's Play brought Mute Records back to prime time and helped put Mute under the umbrella of EMI in a $24 million deal for Miller, while still keeping in control of the company creatively. More acts, including the John Spencer Blues Explosion.
Baby, have mercy, please don't be unkind. I remember Gypsy Woman laid me down and blew my mind.
And what had to be very satisfying for Miller, he would release a compilation album for Rough Trade, his old employer and store that gave him his break. Solo albums for Martin Gore and Dave Gahan, Andy Bell, and even New Order wind up joining Mute Records. As well as Goldfrapp's Utopia single was released on Mute.
Get who I am when I'm with you.
Other bands to be signed that year would be Cabaret Voltaire, A Certain Ratio, Eintausende Neubauten, The Residents, even Kraftwerk remastered and re-released singles through Mute Records, as well as The Swans and Spiral Carpets, and the list goes on. Now, Miller's Warm Leatherette was covered by not only Grace Jones, but Chicks on Speed. A little connection to Respectable Street, his song TVOD was covered by Leather Strip.
Television.
And played here live by Leather Strip just a few years ago. And Chicks on Speed's cover of Warm Leatherette.
Warm.